Hello, it's Wednesday and it's time for another Business Analysis Live. My name is Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at the International Institute of Business Analysis. They call us IIBA. Welcome. And we are glad that you're taking some time today to join us. We are talking about AI today, maybe a little bit of a different spin on AI and how it can help to make us better interviewers. Do you use AI when you're getting ready for an interview? Do you help it to prepare you for what you're going to ask or what you might need to know? Well, we're live. And so today we're going to be talking about that with our guest, AI and human skills for better interviews. But we are going to want to take your questions today because we're live. So, when I think about interviewing, someone that I think does the best talks on interviewing is Pam Paterson. So, she is joining me today. Hello, Pam.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, great to have you, especially on this topic because you do talk about interviewing quite a bit. And I know that you're also thinking about how AI can help. So, maybe before we get started, maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Susan. So, I've been a business analyst for a long time, too many years that I can count. I've written a lot of books, two of them international bestsellers. I have taught project management for over 13 years here in Toronto, and I am a consultant in business analysis and project management. And I am actually writing a book right now about stakeholder interviewing. And here's the thing about how quickly things change. I started this book a few years ago. I was ready to polish it off, send it to the editor, get it published, and then ChatGPT came. So now I'm going back and I'm inserting this into the book. So when the book is released in late 2025, early 2026, we're going to have a really thorough chapter about AI and how to use it for interviews.
It's just amazing how AI is gumming up the works for a lot of us. Just when we think we know what we're doing, now we have to think about AI with it. So, all right. Well, let's get into this topic a little bit. And maybe before we dive into the AI aspect of interviews, maybe we want to just kind of cover interviewing in general. Because we're not necessarily talking about job interviews. We are truly talking about that business analysis technique interviewing. So let's start from there. Tell me a little bit about what makes a good interview.
What makes a good interview? This is an excellent question. An interview is really a conversation with a purpose. So it's not just a conversation. It's not, hello, how are you? How's the weather? It's a conversation with a purpose. So we are literally extracting information from somebody else. And I realize how dire that actually sounds. But that's our job as business analysts. We are extracting information from somebody else. And interviewing is the front end to everything. It is the most often talked about technique in the BABOK. And we need to know interviewing for everything that we do. I mean, if you work in the agile space, you need to do interviewing, extracting information for everything: daily scrums, user stories, development, testing, product backlogs. You're always, always interviewing, extracting information from people. So, what does it take? Well, it takes a human, first of all. I mean, we are interacting with humans who may not be technical, they don't have time, they don't have any interest. So somehow we need to get them interested and get their time. Maybe people go on tangents, they're multitasking. So we need to understand how to handle people. And that needs to be part of our planning process. So first of all, we need to plan. We need to research. What questions are we going to ask? Who are we going to ask of them? What are our goals? What are we looking for? And then when we're doing the interview, we're going to use some more techniques around interviewing to make sure that we are extracting information in the most efficient and best way possible for everybody. And then after the interview, we're going to somehow mine that information. We're going to see patterns and trends and risks and all these kinds of things and how to get requirements out of that, and also to think about how downstream this information can be used.
Hmm. So there is a lot there. I think, for some folks that may not be skilled in this technique, they might think, well, I'm just going to write down my questions and ask. But what you've described is a very comprehensive approach that has a purpose. Um, and you might go in with some questions, but then there's also some human skills that you've talked about that allow you to not just accept the answer and move to the next question, but also kind of be prepared for things that might come up. That's another aspect of this. Um, so let's talk a little bit about some of those human skills, because I know that will be the focus of where we're going to go with our uh, interview today. And actually, you know what? While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to ask our audience if they've got questions. Pop that into comments because we're going to make sure that we take your questions today. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some human skills. You've described some of the tactical skills of interviewing. Human skills. What human skills help us to be good interviewers?
Empathy and interest. When we show that we care about somebody else, when we care about their space, we care about their goals, we care about their hurdles and their barriers, I think that's the number one thing that we can have as a good interviewer. Um, and I have what I call the empathy, appreciation, and demand stack. And this is a stack that I use when I talk to people and when I'm in interviews. So let's say we're not using the stack. I want to show you what that looks like. So it might be that you ask, when are you completing your user stories? Okay. So there's nothing wrong with that question. It's a direct question. It's a question that is asking a legitimate question, looking for information. When are you completing your user stories? But what if we use the stack? And we say empathy, appreciation, and demand. Okay. So here's what that looks like. You must be so busy, and I really appreciate your time and all the work on this project. I'm wondering, when will you have a chance to submit your user stories? And so now, if this person, this stakeholder, is undergoing a lot of stress, has a large caseload, has things going on at home, now that person knows that they're connecting with a human and not a robot who's asking, when are you going to complete those user stories? That's the number one thing that we can do, is have empathy. And when you are leaning into people, into their problems, into their world, into the dynamics that they need to deal with, you're going to get a better rapport and you're going to get trust. And that's the other thing that you need to have as a human being interviewing somebody else, is you need that rapport and you need that trust. And trust is credibility, but it's also consistency. So can they consistently rely upon you to display the same kinds of behavior and predictable patterns in interacting with them? Are you always going to meet your deadlines? Are you always going to be polite? Are you always going to do your due diligence before you walk into that room? And they need to see that, because when people see a pattern in another person, they can start to believe that. Where there's credibility, there's believability.
I I we might underestimate how much um, showing empathy and showing interest can help us to get information from someone. I think we sometimes do ourselves a disservice if we just go in with a set of sort of impersonal questions. I mean, I know sometimes we get questions even here about um, I've got a difficult stakeholder and they just won't answer my questions. Well, to your point, they may feel like maybe you aren't interested in what they have to say, that they're just an item on a checkbox. But being interested in someone, I have often found, will open doors in ways that just having some questions won't. And I think that when people know that you are interested in what they have to say, or well, not or, but and interested in them, they're more likely to share things with you that they hadn't planned on sharing. And that's really when interviews get good, is when you can uncover things that you didn't realize you were going to uncover.
That's so true, Susan. One of the things that you said, it just hit me like a thousand bricks. An item on a checkbox.
Mm,
And when you walk in to an interview with 10 questions that you have, you've done your due diligence, you have researched, you have come up with these great questions, and they are great questions, but you are sitting in front of another human being and just reading the question and looking and recording the answer. Or maybe you're using AI to record the answer. And so that person, you're not listening as a good interviewer, you're not listening for the gold, you're not listening for the nuggets. That person might say something that would take you on a completely different track and ask a better question and get more information. But if you're using kind of a waterfall style of interviewing as opposed to an agile one, whether you're going to continually change based on feedback from the stakeholder and what they say, then your interview is compromised. If we are so set in stone on these 10 questions that we're going to ask. So, and that leads a feeling of item on a checkbox.
yeah,
That's how that stakeholder is going to feel.
yeah. And it really isn't going to get you the results that you're looking for. I think also approaching the interviews with a sense of curiosity. I know sometimes when I've been an analyst on a project and I'm interviewing someone, sometimes I might just start in a completely different place, just maybe even at the top with what I might consider kind of a stupid question, but sometimes it's a question just to open the door to conversations so that we can build a little rapport and I can learn about them. And so I think being curious and letting that interview go wherever it's going to go, to me, is also another human skill that makes us different from what AI can do.
I love that, Susan. And when I'm building in time for interviews and for workshops, I actually build in throwaway time.
Hmm.
And it means that I am building in time not just to ask questions, but to allow them to maybe vent about the project, to vent their frustrations, and because that's building rapport and that's building trust, and not to be so confined on a timeline. And I really think that, that really does open the door to getting to know them and to know who they are. You can never have the best interview if you don't know who that person is. And I'll give you an example that I often talk about in my speaking, which is that, let's say, for example, that you are creating a new CRM system and you are getting the requirements for this system. You have two stakeholders that you're interviewing. One is the CEO, and another one is the customer service rep. And you're going to ask a question about where the button goes on the screen. Okay, so very simple question, simple requirement. And let's say that's the information you need to know. Where's the button going on the screen? Intuitively, we would not ask the CEO this question. We would say, no, that's a question for the customer service rep. The CEO is definitely not interested in being asked this question. But what if the CEO is had 20 staff? The CEO is the founder of the company. The CEO is the company's first developer and is still very hands-on in the development of the product. If we knew that information, then we might ask the CEO where to put that button. And I have a real life example. I'm working with a senior VP at a company right now called McDougall Energy, and it's a company in Northern Ontario. It's Canada's largest privately owned oil and gas company. And this CEO, this VP, he started out as the IT support desk many, many years ago, and he got promoted very quickly to the VP ranks, and this is where he's been for many, many years. However, since he understands the technologies so well at the micro level, he's often able to comment on issues that people are having. So we include him, this senior VP, in meetings that we wouldn't normally invite a senior VP to. And we get better information. And this is all because we know him. So I spend an incredible amount of time, and I'm a huge advocate of getting to know your stakeholders as much as you can. If it means going onto LinkedIn, Googling, looking at their position, and even putting into AI, I have a stakeholder who is an accountant who doesn't like this project. What questions should I ask? How should I handle this stakeholder? You're going to get some good seeds of information from AI to work with them.
I like that idea of adding some time in order to just get to know folks. I used to call it my take 5 to socialize, which was the thing that I would always do at the beginning of my interviews or meetings, and it was just a few minutes to just be human with the folks that I was working with, because you're right, you never know when some piece of information that you've shared as you're socializing might be something later on that you come back to, either because you know it's important to them, or it's a pain point for them, or it's a huh, they might be interested in being part of this discussion because they said blah blah blah. So those are those human skills. Now, you mentioned using AI for interviews. So maybe let's start to talk a little bit about some ways that you see AI helping us to conduct some better interviews. What have you found
Sure.
so far?
So I think of AI as a research assistant and a confidant sitting beside me. And I ask AI all kinds of questions that I wouldn't even ask my coworkers in order to prepare for an interview. But here's the thing about a research assistant or a confidant is you need to tell them what to do. So AI can generate some base questions, but AI has never met these stakeholders. So how could AI possibly do a better job than you in creating questions? So you need to tell them what to do. You need to feed them information. And we talked a little bit about the kind of information that you need to know about people. And this totally changes the questions that you're going to ask. And you also need to talk about the question order. So that's a human thing. Understanding your stakeholders and understanding, well, how should we order these questions and go from general questions to specific, or known questions to unknown, or easy to contentious, because we certainly wouldn't want to do it the other way around, contentious to easy, because our interview might end early.
That's right.
Right? So, but we can use AI for all kinds of things. And the thing for us, though, is to know what the interview process is, to understand the methodology, to understand what we need to do as business analysts, because then you're kind of like delegating tasks to somebody else. Once you know your process and your methodology, you're delegating to AI. So AI, you're going to ask AI, I have these stakeholders, this is their position, this is their interest, their impact, their influence. What kinds of questions can I ask? And AI will give you some good base questions. AI is great for this, by the way. So use it like a research assistant, use it like a confidant. And when you are, there's a lot of discussion around prompt engineering right now. And I love all this discussion around prompt engineering. And the thing about AI, though, is if it's a miss, I mean, you can go back to AI and say, that's not what I was looking for. That's not specific enough. Those questions are too few. Give me some more. You can't do that with a human. You can't keep doing that with your research assistant to come back 10 or 20 times and say, this is wrong. This is wrong. I mean, that's the end of that relationship. So I love AI for this. I think it's absolutely terrific. And after the interview, so use AI for transcription as well.
Oh,
And
yes. Yeah.
after the interview, use AI to slice and dice this information, this transcription, to get even more information, to identify trends and frequent risks talked about or inferred. Use it to generate user stories, test case names, to prioritize requirements. Because AI, looking at pattern recognition and trends, can see the most popular keywords and infer a lot. I think it's terrific using transcripts to create user stories and have AI do it for you.
I think about the times when I have been in a really great interview and where the conversation is flowing really easily, and I am trying to take notes of these of of what I'm hearing, and also trying to capture the next question I'm going to ask so I don't forget it as we move along in the conversation. To me, AI is such a good partner for this piece that it can, if you're able to use an AI tool to give you a transcript, boy, it just, I think, takes that burden off your shoulders, and really allows you to get into the conversation. And I do think of interviews as conversations. Even though it's implied that I'm going to be asking questions and getting answers, I really want it to be a conversation. And so I agree. And even yesterday, I was in a workshop and I had some AI summarization going on so that we could see afterwards, what were the key themes that we talked about? What were the new things that we can learn? You can ask AI to find those things. So it really, I think, is it's such a game changer when it comes to holding the interview.
Susan, could I add something to what you said?
Yeah.
So, 100% AI can analyze a transcript, give us this information. It's terrific. But we always need to remember that humans can add more as well, can add value. Because if you're in that interview, and let's say, it's being transcribed, we technically don't need to take notes. But here's the thing. If you notice your stakeholder having some moment of hesitation or looking away or
Oh,
looking down or maybe a delay in the response, or maybe only having a couple of words in that response where you expected a paragraph. When you notice these kinds of things about your stakeholder, you can put an asterisk behind this comment, or you can flag that the moment it happened at 35 minutes into the interview, or whatever, however way you want to mark it, and to follow up later, because that might be where the good stuff is, that you can follow up later and dive deep and ask that stakeholder or ask a different stakeholder the same question and see what kind of response you get.
that is good. And that, I think, is irreplaceable when it comes to the work that we do versus what AI can do. That being able to understand when somebody's body language or demeanor is changing when you're asking a question is really something only a human can do. And you're right, that is very often where, if you can find a way to gently follow up on that, you can get some really good information. And so that really is important. And I think knowing that AI is going to do the heavy lifting of the taking the notes, you actually can maybe even lean into your empathy and human skills a little bit more. I mean, being able to be self aware in a way that maybe is hard when you're trying to both take notes and ask questions and analyze what they're saying all at the same time. That's hard.
It's hard. We're like superhumans as interviewers, aren't we?
How did we do
And
all this before AI? How did we do it all?
yeah, I'm a big fan of transcription and going back, and sometimes the words are not transcribed exactly accurately, which can be kind of humorous as well. But
True.
it's really terrific to have all these new tools. And one of the things that a traditional interviewer and an interviewee dynamic doesn't set up is the fact that people are different, right? And so that, people say, well, will AI replace me as an interviewer? Unlikely, because so many people are different. They have different challenges. They have different even ways of processing information. Some people are very verbal and do well in interviews. And some people are very visual and introverted. And you can ask them the question in the interview, but their best answer is going to come after the interview when you give them the opportunity to add to their answer and to give some feedback in the visual way that they process information. So sending something by email, getting an answer back. And I know this for myself because I primarily process information visually. And to get these conferences and podcasts and so forth, I spend a lot of time to prepare verbally, because that's not my strength. But when you recognize that in a person and you just naturally allow that to your stakeholders to give information in different ways and different time frames, you're going to get a better answer.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, really, the purpose of elicitation is to uncover information. And there are so many ways and so many speeds that can happen for people that you're talking to, that I think giving um, giving your stakeholders the opportunity to have multiple ways to give you answers and is really will give you the best kind of information, because you're right, very often I've gotten an answer in the interview, and then maybe a day or so later that person would reach out and say, hey, you know what, I've been thinking about this some more, and I think da 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 da, or I'd like to meet with you and talk some more about this. So, yeah, again, I think those are some human skills, that separate us from AI. But I have also noticed in my use of AI that I'm able to bring my interviewing skills into using AI. Have you found that to be true? What are you think? What do you think, of the interviewing skills make us better users of AI, whether or not we use it for an interview, just using it in general?
In prompt engineering, this is a fantastic topic because when you can ask better questions to AI, I mean, it's like AI being your stakeholder. When you can ask better questions, then you're going to get better answers. And there's a lot of really great discussion and tips around prompt engineering that I like a lot, and even feeding into AI the scenarios. So, AI, you are a business analyst and you're going to generate some questions about this lottery app project. What kind of questions are you can generate for this stakeholder and that stakeholder? So and AI is very, very bright, right? I mean, bright in quotes. And you can even ask AI, how do I best use you? What kinds of prompt engineering techniques can I use to get the most out of you? And AI is very honest. So AI will tell you exactly what you need if AI knows it, right? That's the thing. But yeah, it's interesting that the interview techniques that we've always used as human beings can actually be used in AI as well. I like that a lot.
I do too. I've got I have a guest coming up who thinks of AI as a stakeholder, and so that really gets me to think about, well, if ChatGPT were my stakeholder, how would I want to interact with that stakeholder in order to elicit the best information? And so when I think about how I would ask questions of someone, I can apply those same kinds of techniques to that. I can and the nice thing about it is I can be just as conversational. I don't have to learn a whole other language to interact with something like ChatGPT. I can ask the question exactly as I would say it to someone else, which I think is amazing. Because you think about a lot of tools we use, we have to learn a completely different language or set of techniques in order to use that, but we don't with AI. Um, the other thing I have found are the follow-up questions are even more important when you're using AI, because AI doesn't get it right all of the time, or it might misunderstand what you're talking about. A good example of that is, as we were thinking about a title for today's show, I started to ask AI for some ideas, and it thought our show was going to be about job interviews. And I had to say, oh, no, we're not talking about job interviews. We're talking about interviewing as a business analysis technique. Can you give me some? So, in some ways, it also gives you a little bit of practice with, how do I ask follow up questions? How do I correct something that I've heard so that I can get a good answer because it is something that we deal with when we are talking to humans. Sometimes they answer our question in a way we didn't expect, so we need to be able to rephrase or follow up.
It's so true, and, one of the things that I like about AI is just how honest it is. So, if you ask a question that is not clear or not concise, then you're going to get a response that is not clear or not concise or is misdirected, and I think in asking AI questions, we're actually going to be better interviewers. We're going to learn how to be better interviewers, how to be more precise and concise and also just more directed. And just like a stakeholder, and as you mentioned, AI can be really thought of as a stakeholder. We need to be we need to plan and do our research, and we need to think about our personal organization in approaching that communication. It can't be haphazard. You can't be randomly asking different kinds of questions in a weird order and for the project and expect a coherent response from AI. So we need to think about maybe the way that we approach it. So for example, we might start with conceptual information about the project and then move into asking AI about the kinds of questions that we should ask. So going from general to specific, which is one of the techniques that I use with a human being, because you can't go from specific to general without AI getting a little bit confused about what you're actually asking about.
One of the other things I've noticed is that sometimes you can give it way too much information up front. And it's a good reminder that, especially when we're speaking with a human, the same thing applies. We can't just unload all of this information on someone and then ask a question. We do need to have an approach. And what is that approach that will work best for the purpose of your of the outcomes you're trying to get? So I think there are little techniques like that that help you use AI better that frankly can be turned around and used in your human interviews as well. I like the idea of using AI as a way to just practice your interview skills. I think that makes a lot of sense. If you aren't confident, try it out on AI. You've got a willing partner.
100%. And there's no repercussions. Nobody's going to drink all the coffee in the lunchroom, right?
True. And you know what? If you ask embarrassing questions or just weird questions, nobody's going to say anything.
Nobody's going to say
Actually,
anything. Nobody's going to remember. Nobody's going to look at you funny next time.
that's right. That's right. So give it a try. If you think I'd like to work on my interviewing skills, try it out. And you know what? You also reminded me that we come with another technique in our back pocket, which is use cases. And use cases can be such a great way to get AI to know what it is you're trying to ask and of who. So, as a role, I want to, so that you can actually use that as a way to ask questions of AI as well. So, you can kind of take, I said use case, but I meant user story. You know what I mean.
I do.
You can use that technique.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, I can't tell you how much AI has saved me time personally on projects, and even saying, this latest project I've been on, doing a CRM, and this is a wide scale. It's a large CRM. It's a really big project, and probably without AI, we didn't have enough time to do everything. But getting AI to do those starter requirements, those starter user stories, and being able to leverage that information. So, when it comes to information lifecycle, when you think about the downstream activities and people that need to use that information, and you consult with them first about the best format and criteria and parameters that they need, then you're getting that information up front. And when you're using AI, there's some huge savings there in doing information and generating information and getting information and packaging it the first time. And that's where I find that AI, the more that you are personally organized in your project, the
Oh,
better that you can leverage AI for all kinds of things. It's really quite incredible.
Yeah, and I'll broaden that statement. The more that you can just be organized in general, it leads to that trust equation you were talking about. So you become more credible, you become more reliable, you are seen as someone who is prepared to do the job. And that says a lot about you as a business analysis professional. So use all the tools that you can to help you be more organized and prepared. Well, I tell you what, we've got a couple of comments and maybe some questions. So just a reminder to everyone out there, we are live today. So if you've got some questions, we're going to take a couple of your questions. Let's see, what do we have? I listen, I just started to star these things, so some of these could be they could be comments. So Arena says our gut feeling won't be replaced by AI, at least for now. So let's make the best of it. I think that's true. Do do you so when I'm interviewing a human, I am fairly self-aware and I am kind of watching what's happening. Do you ever get kind of that feeling when you're using AI? Do you find yourself being self-aware and those normal skills of empathy and curiosity? Do you find yourself ever having those when you're using AI?
I actually do. And I have a friend who was, having a bad day and just thought, well, maybe I'll just go talk to AI. And so that's what he did. He said, I'm having a bad day. And then AI said, well, why are you having a bad day? And then whatever, job stress, whatever, put that in. And then AI asked, what would you be doing if you weren't working in your job? Oh, well, I would be playing soccer. Oh, what teams do you like? Oh, I like Liverpool. I like Manchester. Oh, they're doing very well this year. Oh, yes, they are. And it completely elevated his mood. And so I know that AI doesn't have empathy, but a lot of people don't. And we enjoy speaking to them. And I think AI can do a lot of things for us.
Well, it sounds like AI, it had a little bit of interest. It was just showing interest. And talk about a mood lifter. Even if it is just a technology, what a mood lifter to have somebody on the other side, somebody that's asking you questions. So interesting. All right. Let's see. I think we've got another. Fadden says human skills and personal interaction remain irreplaceable. Yes, I think that is true. Let's see, what do we have here? Building throwaway time, getting to know the person. Um, it really pays benefits. All
It
right.
does. And one of the things that AI can never do for stakeholders is favors. I have what I
True.
call an emotional bank account, and I make deposits in other people's bank accounts all the time. So when it comes time that I need a favor, I need to call it in, I can get it right away. And other people are kind of like, well, how did you get that person to do that? That takes a lot of time. They're really busy. And I just say, well, I don't know. I mean, it just happened, I guess.
I think this is really important because this is another area that cannot be replaced, and that is being able to reciprocate. um, because that sometimes is so necessary in the work that we have to do. Priorities change. I need someone at the last minute. I mean, think of the variety of ways that we need to call on favors, and there are things that we can do for others as well. That's a really important part of that trust equation is being able to be human and be able to ask favors and to help other people maybe when it's not even the thing that you are there to do, but it can be important in a longer term relationship. All right, let's see. I see. Oh, here we go. Temi says ChatGPT is like garbage in, garbage out. Give it a great prompt and it provides a great response, and the same for the reverse. Master your prompt, and AI will be your best friend.
Well, this is true. But you know what? AI, unlike a stakeholder, will actually help us create better prompts, right? So if we put in garbage and we get a response that we don't like, we can go back to AI and say, that wasn't what I was looking for. What I'm looking for is ABC. And then AI will try again. And we can't really do that with a human. If a human gives us something that is not usable, then we can't really we have limits in what we can say to that human to get a better response.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Although that is a great personal skill to develop, is being able to rephrase that question in a number of ways in order to get the response that you're looking for, or that get you closer to what it is that you need. Um, so that's something you probably can practice with AI. Let's see. All right. Fatin had another thought. I think AI empowers business analysts by providing smarter insights, faster analysis, and greater clarity in decision making. We haven't really talked about decision making yet. Sometimes in interviews, that is part of what we are trying to get to. Do you have any thoughts on how AI can help us with making some better decisions?
In a way, a response is a decision. So if we are asking for user stories or test case names or titles, things like that, and AI provides a response, that really is a decision. They have decided, I'm saying they, this is
They.
AI. They have decided that this is the best response and this is a decision based on the information that you provided. Where I like to use AI is not so much for decision, but comparative analysis.
Hmm.
So I might say, what are the pros and cons of this scenario, of this situation? Give me the cost and the benefit for this scenario. And that's where I find that AI is really good at providing the pros and cons, because I recognize that AI is limited in the information that they have, and the nuances and maybe the power and the politics happening in the workplace. And so I recognize the limitations of AI as well, but having those pros and cons and benefits and analysis, and even you can ask AI for a different perspectives of a scenario. So you can, because there are perspectives that influence the decisions and the way that we think about something. So you can say, well, what would the accountant think about scenario A? What would the logistics person think about scenario A? And AI can help you with those kinds of evaluative sort of qualities of a scenario as well.
Often what we've got to provide are options, and sometimes I mean I've used AI to be kind of an option generator, because sometimes it'll be a little more creative than I might be, and that can be really helpful if you are trying to help someone make a decision. Sometimes you've got to bring some options, so AI can also help with that. You mentioned a business case, using it to help you there. I think another great example of how you can use AI. Well, I don't see any more questions today. I think we have answered them all. Let's see. Yeah. So, well, what do you want to leave folks with interviewing in AI? What thoughts do you have as folks take away what we've talked about today?
Number one is I want folks to get good at interviewing and understanding the methodology without AI. Really understand the different kinds of question types, the order of questions, how that impacts success of an interview. I want them to understand how to work with that human and the nuances and the body language, and understand and be good at interviewing. And then I really want you to lean in on AI. AI has saved people countless hundreds of hours in interviewing, prep, and conducting and the analysis afterwards. And I think it's a fantastic tool to lean into.
Those are some good things to think about. Especially, don't forget, you're the human. Lean into that. That is still really important in uncovering information. Pam, it was good to talk to you today. I know I'm going to see you in person in a couple of weeks. I am looking forward to it. You're like on a European speaking tour these days, so I know I'm going to see you in Belgium in a couple of weeks. Where else are you going to be?
I am doing a lot of speaking. This is true. I don't think I'm going to know my house anymore. I am going to Antwerp for a couple of conferences. I'm going to Copenhagen, Luxembourg. I'm going to Poland as well, and I might be going to one other location. And so I'm very excited about this European tour and talking more about interviewing and stakeholders to a European audience.
Yes, and then at some point we'll see your book, and that's maybe coming up later this year or early next year. So we'll have you back on because we'll want to talk about that.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. All right. Well, that is it for today, but we'll be back in 2 weeks and we're going to be talking more about AI. Gosh, it's like an AI bonanza here. So we're going to be talking about AI and the future of business analysis roles. We're going to be having that conversation with Deirdre Karen right here in 2 weeks. So we want to thank you for joining us today. Bye.